I'm blinded.
Put your glasses on.
Why? What did I do?
Yeah.
Because in the spring.
So your options are
budget.
You forgot my last name. I represent the Redmond area for anyone who doesn't know that. I'm not sure where on the agenda this will fall, but I do actually have an email from Commissioner Kelly that I'd like to read at some point, just with a couple remarks, but it doesn't matter when.
Finish up that or come
Yeah.
around.
Commissioner Adair, and I live out by Sisters. I'm Susan Altman. I'm the planning commissioner. I'm planning commission. I represent Bend. Thank you.
Nathan Hofkamp, I'm on the planning commission too. I think I'm a Bend area representative, so no.
Mark Stockamp on Planning Commission at large and live in Deschutes River Woods.
Phil Chang, Deschutes County Commissioner.
Matt Cyrus, Planning Commission, Sisters area.
And Tony DeBone, Deschutes County Commissioner, Southern Deschutes County resident, but we represent everybody in the county. So, yeah, is it appropriate for that?
Yeah,
You know?
sure.
No, I mean,
Okay, so I'll just read these because it's more appropriate than summarizing. Outlook, I find it very cumbersome. So this is referring to the email addresses. Frustrating and wastes unnecessary time. I often use evenings and weekends to study for the commission. More often than not, when I log in, I am asked to change my password or the authenticator doesn't seem to work. I'm then forced to wait for business hours to reset my password or ask for help with these issues. I have Evan on IT as a contact in my phone. He is great, by the way. I have found a workaround to receive the packets on the public website, but I've missed key communication from staff due to my lack of ability to log in. Is there a way to send communication to our personal emails or a way for us to reset our own passwords? Okay, and then there's one other one. Planning and code complaint funding. I understand funding for these departments is directly linked to new permits. In some ways, this makes sense, supply and demand, but I have several issues with this model. One, it portrays an optics to the public that since the planning department's funds are directly attached to new permits, they are biased to approve growth. Two, in theory, code complaints are consistent no matter the market. That department should have a stable staffing. Three, Deschutes County has always had a boom and bust housing market. I can imagine that instability provides stress on the staff. I understand our current model is actually not the norm, and other counties have the planning department's budget come from the general fund. I understand this from an outsider's perspective, but it has bothered me, and therefore I wanted to bring it up. I'm sincerely sorry for missing this meeting and appreciate everything all three of you do.
Here we go. Well, thank you very much for providing that to us. Along the lines of the Outlook, I have heard that a few times. It's a real shame because if you're off-site and your authenticator isn't going, or if the password needs to be reset, it is during business hours. And I can imagine there's just that window of time where it expires, and then all of a sudden, yeah, you can't just get it reset without calling in. So that's a shame.
We have 14 days though to reset our password. So do you not have that amount of time too?
I think we do have that amount of time, but I've also experienced what Commissioner Kelly's referring to. So just speaking to my experience rather than hers. So if you're resetting it and you type in the wrong password as you reset,
That helps you out.
Y-
That's
yeah, and so then you just have to set aside time during the working day. But for those of us who are working at our other jobs during the working day, it's a little bit hard to take time off work to then make a call to IT. But it's okay. It's just from my perspective, it's okay. But it's personally, I'm a little embarrassed to admit that I've been locked out of my email for a little while, and so it's on my to-do list. But
No, that's good to discuss though. I mean, because Bernie Brader is on our DMAC committee and he's got a flip phone and he can't get the authenticator and I think he had it going once, but then it expired. Now he's lost again. And I heard somebody else recently too. So this is happening. It's happening.
My workaround was always just to ask Commissioner Stockcamp to email me.
Oh, there you go. He's on it. So call him. But I mean, it's not funny because we are trying to provide
I did that for a year.
the public records, history of the communication going back and forth. But if it's hard to use and it's frustrating, yeah, why do we even do that?
usually they want me to check in on Friday night and then something crazy happens and then I'm like, just because I like to have my phone with me, most all weekends. And anyway, yeah, it happens a lot.
yeah,
And I text Whitney. You could text Whitney too. She has to.
On the weekend.
aw.
Well, but yeah, I mean, let's acknowledge this and we'll see what we can do if there's any way we can help or if IT can come in and explain something or change a policy.
I will say your IT guys are incredible because I put it off for at least a year and finally I decided to spend the half hour on the phone and have them talk me through the process of setting it up.
And I just looked over my shoulder for the first time. So Tony, thank you very much for joining us.
That was the only reason why my hand was up. I wanted you guys to know I was here.
Yeah, as I say, I didn't even look over my shoulder. I was wondering what it looked like. So thank you so much for joining us. As I say, the next step really is public comment. We kind of had some good comments there.
Before we move on, I'd like to speak to Commissioner Kelly's second concern that she expressed. I share similar concerns. There are a lot of things that happen within the community development department that I don't think should be tied to current permit application fees. And I'm actually really interested by Commissioner Kelly's other comment that other counties don't fund their community development department this way. I would love to kind of see an analysis of kind of different funding models by different county planning organizations around the state.
I would certainly second that. I think actually last year at this very meeting, we had that discussion of funding models. And if I recall, we had fairly unanimous agreement that it made sense to fund at least portions of it. For example, long-range planning, code enforcement, some of those things from general fund because they're not permit related. I certainly agree with that.
This is a really unfortunate time to have that discussion because there's so little opportunity to switch to general fund funding. In the history of Deschutes County, this is probably one of the worst possible times to consider that. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't still discuss it though.
But I know that during downturns, when I had first gotten started, in fact, long-range planning has been subsidized by general fund, but it's a haphazard, annual choice. So there's no policy that says we're going to do it like this, but there has been support by the Board of Commissioners to keep long-range planning during downtime period. So as I say, we had a great, economic crash in 2008, 9, 10 or whatever. And then we've had, other things happen. So, I mean, it's something to be discussed. I don't know. I mean,
Commissioner Kelly's point that, code complaints don't slow down when growth is slow. I mean, that is a real consideration and concern.
Actually, they probably go up.
And they very well may.
Hmm.
I'm guessing during COVID, when everybody was at home, there's a lot of concerns.
yeah, there's more focus on what the neighbor's property really does look like, right?
Yeah.
Well, so as I say, you're bringing that up and you said you kind of seconded it. I don't know if we're really making a motion on.
Well, no, I just
making sure.
I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
we had
okay.
this very discussion a year ago
Yeah.
at this meeting. And I think we generally had consensus that it made sense, and I don't know what it takes to move that process along, but
Yeah.
I mean, I'd like to see it addressed maybe for the next budget cycle at least.
And that was my thought. This would be a budget discussion, annual budget discussion.
We're having our preliminary meeting in January. I think.
Mm-hmm.
That could definitely come up there.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Nick Vila, County Administrator. We can certainly look into the various models. I think that's a really good place to start, and just to kind of outline what different counties do, so you have that familiarity and that understanding. A lot of the local governments that do fund their, particularly planning, out of their general fund, all the permit fees also go into the general fund. And so then that is reallocated out. And so there are pros and cons, and we can talk about that. The department loses a bit of, control is a lack, it's not a great term, but right now they collect the revenues, they build reserves, and then they aim to provide a consistent level of high services during all economic cycles. Well, if those funds go into the general fund, it will depend on the Board of Commissioners and the Budget Committee at the time in the amount of money to then allocate. And the department may or may not then have the funding, probably more likely to have funding as the economy declines, but as all of a sudden things boom, if the general fund's not able to support those additional resources, it's just, there's trade-offs. So let's explore it, talk about it, and give you some options so you can make an informed recommendation.
Yeah, Peter Gutowski, Community Development Director. We have had this conversation, I think last year, heading maybe as part of the budget discussions or just before, per the direction of the Board of County Commissioners. Our comparable jurisdictions are relying on fees. So Washington County, Clackamas County, Lane County, even the city of Bend. There are some nuances. The city of Bend, for this current fiscal year, set their planning fees deliberately below cost recovery based on some certain assumptions that they thought they could get it through volume. If they don't meet their budget targets, the general fund picks up the difference. So it's complicated. There are many counties that aren't experiencing the kind of growth and development and maybe even the demands that Deschutes County is, that are able to subsidize their planning fees and rely on general fund to provide those gaps in long range planning. To the extent they have long range planning, the general fund picks that up. So it is a nuanced analysis, but again, I mean, Commissioner, you may remember this, like Washington County, Lane County raised their fees significantly for going into this budget year to maintain just their current levels of service. So one of the themes that has been acknowledged this evening is the general fund right now is under a lot of pressure. And certainly the Community Development Department looks for any guidance and direction ultimately from the Board of County Commissioners. The point that Nick raised, and you know, whether or not this is the right term, control, but as the Community Development Department, you know, we want to plan for long range planning. We want to budget for long range planning. So the volatility of that funding mechanism, if you were to go to the general fund, and of course, it's subject to the county commissioners' revisitation every year. But if it were to change, all of a sudden what was considered a stable funding source through the general fund, it's either going to be made up through our current methodology, which is through growth and development, or you're going to be looking for grants to the extent they're available, or you're going to be looking for, staff reductions. So there has been some consistency over the years under this imperfect model, because the community development department, in this case, Will Groves, the planning manager, can put forth a budget that is based upon, previous budget, methodologies. But in any event, just happy to run this analysis again, especially as we go into fiscal year 27 to see what our comparables are doing for your perspective. But that was certainly a summation of the analysis that you asked me to provide you heading into the budget conversations that we had in May.
So Peter, is this a document, like this analysis that you did before? Is this something that you produced and have shared with the Planning Commission previously?
I don't know.
Because I'm, I don't necessarily want to ask you to do it again if you just did it a couple of years ago, but
yeah, it's a really good question, and what I have, my response to the Planning Commission, certainly they have in the past expressed strong opinions about how the Community Development Department, code enforcement, long-range planning should be funded. My respectful response has been, you are welcome to communicate that as a commission or even individually, but respectfully, the funding of the department is really not the purview of the Planning Commission if you look at their duties. So it's been a kind of respectful clarification, and maybe this would be helpful if the board disagrees with that, but I'm trying to direct the Planning Commission to their primary duties, which is to look at our policies, our zoning, our regional coordination, the issues that are affecting the county as we continue to be the fastest growing county in the region. How our budget is structured with and ultimately implemented is, in my perspective, is not necessarily the purview of the Planning Commission, to the extent they have strong opinions. Again, the Planning Commission wants to bring that up at the discretion of the chair. I certainly recognize that, but there are also individual pathways, but that's how I've responded. And by all means, if you feel that that's can be further clarified or have better sideboards, I am open to it, but that's how I've handled it to date.
I appreciate that. I mean, I would also say that if we rely on the Planning Commission to guide to a significant degree the long-range planning work of the county, that it's reasonable for them to have an interest in the stability of our long-range planning capacity. So I mean, I may just be one county commissioner, but like you're hearing it from the Board of Commissioners level as well, that I think it's valuable to take a look at this. We don't need to rush to make any changes. We can be very thoughtful about it. I mean, I just heard you describe the kinds of volatility and uncertainty switching to a general fund, model would introduce. But I mean, it's the devil against the devil you don't know. I mean, the volatility of Community Development Department funding in the last 3 or 4 years has been really substantial. I mean, you know that better than anyone else. And again, that is the devil that you know. But I think it would be valuable to compare that to the devil that we don't know, or that we don't fully understand yet.
Please.
So it seems like there's like maybe 2 different ideas that are getting suggested or talked about, and one is, I think, I'm careful not to speak for Commissioner Kelly, but I think this is just her raising her concern in general. Like, as you said, Peter, like as an individual planning commission member, she's just kind of saying, hey, can you guys take a look at this? I'm not hearing in her message that she's asking for any sort of like planning commission involvement in that, although that may be her intent. But she doesn't state that. And then so there, one process is like, maybe you guys want to look at this. The other process that Commissioner Chang's brought up that I really appreciate is maybe it would be valuable for the planning commission to be involved on some level, because aside from what you're saying, where, yeah, like we do care what happens to our long range staffing and all the support that we have as a planning commission, but also just the types of projects that we're able to implement when it comes down to coming up with a work plan and things like that. Those are all affected by staffing levels. But the other reason why is because we frequently hear comments from the public about funding, and we're here to represent citizens in general. So maybe if there's a great way to communicate what you all decide with this or how you analyze it to us as citizens, then that helps citizens in general understand what's going on with funding, so there's not misunderstandings about why things are funded the way they are. I mean, even just in this little very short tidbit here, I learned a lot about, I'm sure Commissioner Kelly, when she watched the video, will also kind of see that there's a lot of nuance here and there's a lot of different reasons. It's not, the public perception that she mentions in here is probably one of those things that happens when, people don't have a complete picture of all the nuances and jump to conclusions. So, oh, like this and that is happening because of this and that. And I know Commissioner Kelly doesn't, I'm assuming Commissioner Kelly probably doesn't think that, but she is relaying a significant community perception that that we're all kind of aware of and comes up a lot.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you. I guess when I first came into this, I didn't realize kind of how the funding mechanism all worked. And I kind of look at it from the accounting perspective of fixed versus variable costs. I look at long range planning as a fixed cost that should be stable. And I looked at from a perspective is that general fund is a more stable funding mechanism because it's, tax based, and it's a much larger budget that could be stable within the general fund, versus something that's permit based is variable costs, variable expenses that, I personally think should be attached to the permit income as for short-term stuff. And so that was kind of in my mind how I was laying it out is, the things that are ongoing and fixed and that are stable regardless of what's happening in the permit system. And so I guess I just, from a logic standpoint, think it makes sense. And given the fact that we as the planning commission deal with the long range side on a regular basis, what projects we're doing shouldn't be based on what permits are being bought that month or in that 6-month period as far as, income level. So that was just kind of my logic behind it. Is I think it makes sense to at least break out things that are fixed regardless of how many permits are being sold.
Well, so remember, not everybody wants to see growth too. So if we invest in general fund, then we're using tax dollars of existing people to manage the future or envision the future. And I'm just pointing out there's just a little undertow there sometimes. So having development pay for development, that is kind of one of the philosophies that has been started with there too.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I guess my thought is that it's the general public that shows up here to testify on what we're doing, and why I think general funds should be the ones paying for that public process.
Yeah, someone who wants to build a new house, they are paying for the service of reviewing that new house so that it can be built in a way that, that fits with the neighborhood and is safe and all of those things. But long range planning and code enforcement, in my opinion, are about maintaining quality of life for residents. And that is really disconnected from what you're paying for when you plunk down your dollars for your permit application fee. And I think it is appropriate for us to pay for the future quality of life of our residents out of the general fund.
Crazy.
Just to.
We're gonna keep going on this
Okay.
topic for a while.
Well, and to expand on that, that would help bring down the cost of housing if all of the long-range planning wasn't hanging on the higher fees that you're going to have to charge in order to cover that. You know, one of the things we keep hearing is housing needs to be more affordable. Well, permits and fees are a big chunk of what it costs to build a house. So that would have a direct impact on housing costs.
Commissioner
Well,
Williams here. I would like to
Very narrow
speak.
these days. Oh, Tony, please.
Yes. This is something having now starting my 5th year on the Planning Commission, something that I have thought about quite a bit. I sometimes feel that the development fees, the SDCs, they can be a driver that influences decisions in so many different directions. I would be interested in looking at that alternative of a general fund, and maybe it's a hybrid. It's part general, it's part driven, but I feel decisions are sometimes made because of that fee driven focus.
Well, yeah, this is a good discussion for the cross section of the Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners. As I say, it's just one of those things that came up, and thank Kelsey for even starting the conversation here tonight.
So maybe, if this is a budget committee type discussion, maybe this analysis that comes out of CDD can go to the budget committee, but there can be some report back and coordination with the Planning Commission as that's being evaluated.
Yeah, Commissioner, I completely agree. As Peter said, it's not the purview of the Planning Commission, but the Planning Commission is the citizen involvement body of the county. So you're raising the issue. This is the perfect forum
Yep.
to raise it and for us to listen to it and to hear it. And we're hearing direction from the board in particular, but also the Planning Commission. Then we'll dive right into it and take a look at it. It'll take us a few months, but we're happy to do that. And it's a topic that we've heard about. I mean, I've been with the county for almost 17 years and Peter for over 20, for a long time. And we're happy to dive into it if it's the will of the board and the Planning Commission.
Well, as I say, folding it into the budget efforts, so because it could just be one of the byproducts of, okay, we're looking at this year's budget. There's been discussion about, what if, and let's do some analysis on it. So we're going to do budget anyways annually.
And if I could just ask one more thing. So when you do this look at other counties that are a similar population size, I mean, that is a useful thing to look at. But I'm not sure if those are also really fast-growing counties with the kinds of long-range planning issues that we have, or the kinds of code enforcement issues that we have. And so, I mean, if there's a way to also do that kind of a look, here's, the counties that are about the same size as us, here's what they do. Counties who have, to the extent that there is a comparable, similar kinds of long-range planning or code enforcement issues that we have, how do they do it?
Yeah, I think, great question, Commissioner Chang, and we have comparable counties or local governments for the wage equity study. That's a different analysis. That's an analysis that was, those comparables were determined by the Board of County Commissioners. In this case, I mentioned Lane County, I mentioned Clackamas County, Washington County, like they're never, there's not going to be a perfect fit, but when you think of the geographic area, the fact that there are unincorporated communities, that, Lane County is the only county that applies all 19 statewide planning goals. So you're talking about sophistication. They have a relatively same size, department to the extent that you can match them. So, we can provide kind of that context. But for example, we wouldn't look at like Grant County, or we wouldn't look at Harney County, because they're not they're predominantly, rural, with a sparsely populated set of constituents. So we can provide the rationale for kind of why we looked at this. We can include Jackson County. That might be another one. That has, the county in some respects is a kind of one-to-one correlation, but I think we can provide that level of analysis, and as has been noted this evening, put it in a format as we get closer to budget conversations for fiscal year 27.
Thank you.
The only other piece I would offer, and I like to comment a lot about looking at other counties, and maybe we select just a couple of counties, for example, that might be outside of Oregon, only because of the boom and bust. I appreciated what Commissioner Kelly said, is the boom and bust nature of our economy is unique. And I'm not sure that Lane and Clackamas and some of these other counties may experience the same kind of boom and bust cycle that we have here over our history. So it might be helpful to look at, maybe we pick one in Colorado or California or something like that, that has maybe a similar economy. So just another thought, but again, we'll keep it manageable.
I mean, like right now Jackson's at 221,000 people. And I was thinking the same thing, that maybe we needed to look outside the state to invest. Yeah.
Great.
Like, what is it? There's only 24,000 people in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, in that county, but I'm sure they have some boom and bust.
Maybe Missoula, Montana.
Yeah, Montana, definitely.
Interesting place.
Okay, well, so that's still just kind of rolling around in the comments. At this time, action items, background, land use interests. So is this the back of the memo? Is the starting point for these topics, or what?
Yeah, excellent question, Mr. Chairman. This was, we wanted to offer, we've done this in the past. This is a common format for the joint meeting between the board and the planning commission. These are items that are front and center. Will Grove, our planning manager, is joining us. So to the extent that these items or any others that are at the forefront of your thought process, this opportunity to discuss them, Will has been engaging the board on these topics. We received some direction earlier this month about how to proceed with some capacity that's now presented itself with the comp plan update reconsideration, finishing its local process, in addition to some other elements that Dark Skies has just ended. So there's some of the elements pertaining to clear and objective housing standards have been fulfilled. So we wanted to identify them to see if it sparked a conversation, but certainly this is not the only list of topics.
Matt?
Yeah, you mentioned the Dark Skies, and I would like to thank the Board of Commissioners for allowing us to dive into that one this year. It's one that's been on our radar for years, and we appreciate the opportunity to
Finalized yesterday.
Thank you. So no, we've been looking forward to diving into that one. I think it'll help.
We call it that the lighting standards, or lighting chapter, which has got the nickname of Dark Skies now. So as I say, it's kind of funny. We call it the Dark Skies, but that's not even the name of it in the chapter at all. And this really does implement a 3-year window of compliance. There's some fixtures out there that aren't going to be in compliance as of now, or 90 days from now, or whatever you think of it officially. But that kind of starts a 3-year clock for.
We cut it to 2.
Oh, I think it's 3.
We did 3.
I think we recommended 2.
Well, we got to 3. I don't know, whatever. I'm just saying, but the acknowledgement, as I say, I was saying yesterday morning, 5:30 in the morning, I'm looking out from my kitchen. There's bright light, and it's almost a quarter mile away probably, but it's just bright bulb right on the side of somebody's house.
We have a neighbor that my wife keeps threatening to shoot all the lights out.
I wasn't upset about it. I was
That's
just
a bit
thinking,
better.
yeah. I wasn't upset about it. I just noticed it now that I think about these things.
Well, I wanted to, you know, reflect the gratitude back. You know, that this was a complicated topic, especially trying to figure out how to craft some rules that would helpful, that would move the ball down the court, but, you know, which recognized how limited our enforcement capacity is, you know, and trying to navigate that, you know, to create something that was actually going to be workable and manageable for, you know, for county staff.
Why do you think we need general fund money?
Because we have a months and months long waiting list for some folks who have code complaints in.
No,
Well-
actually, there were people who volunteered to help with that one.
Yeah.
And a lighting complaint's going to be a code enforcement issue, so we might have added to it. But as I say, hopefully it's not going to ever escalate to a real bad situation. It's truly just a light bulb being obscured, down facing, pretty simple. Maybe changing a fixture, maybe just putting a shade on it. So we'll see where it all goes.
Yeah, and just to finish my thought, so the planning commission did the
Oh,
heavy
yeah,
lift.
thank you. Yeah.
Did the heavy lifting on that, and much appreciation, because there's been a lot of people in our community who've been calling for that for a long time.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our pleasure. I think we enjoyed that. Like Matt said, we were all really excited to work on it, and we appreciate you guys listening to what we came up with. So
Okay, well, so yeah, do you want to take it away here, Will, or just the topics?
Yeah, thank you. Your planning manager, Will Groves. So some of the topics that we had for you, and for both of these bodies, I've talked to both of you about these with some regularity. You know, the big project we have coming up here is the Terrebonne Community Plan. This is, of course, responsive to the anticipated opening of the Terrebonne Sanitary District and providing sanitary sewer in 2018. And as the Terrebonne community
When?
in Terrebonne.
In 2028.
Sorry, 2028.
Yeah, I think you said 18.
Yeah, I got so old. How did this happen?
I was.
Isn't that amazing? It just was Y2K, it seemed like yesterday.
It's like
Thank you, Will.
years ago. Thank you. So 2028 opening day. And right now, you know, my general assessment is that code is not ready for the development that community is going to see. And this is something that both the sanitary district and other members of the community have expressed interest in. And so with the board's direction and coming to the planning commission, of course, the community plan update. So that kicks off in a real way at our next meeting here before the planning commission. We've got some infrastructure folks from the Terrebonne community. So water, sewer, ODOT, transportation, to think about some of the infrastructure concerns that are likely to come up there. But as you can imagine, you know, whenever we've come to these communities, there's been a real divide between people who are excited about the economic opportunities. And there are people who are, this is my hometown. I don't want to see it change. And so I expect a really vibrant discussion about that. You saw that in Tumalo, of course, where, you know, there's a limitation put on multifamily housing to allow for 4 units of multifamily housing on a property as opposed to potentially unlimited amount of that. So you can see how that balanced in Tumalo. It'll be interesting to see how it balances in Terrebonne. Terrebonne has been so limited in its development capacity because of septic and the soils in the area that don't support that septic. So Terrebonne has approximately 1,400 people living there, and the sewer system will open up over the course of several years up to 800 new units, assuming that those aren't, you know, single people in each case. Terrebonne doubles in population over that time frame. And so you can imagine that community rolls out in very different ways. You know, does it right now 747,000 people a year go to Smith Rock? You know, so 750,000 people go to Smith Rock a year. And, you know, you could imagine hotels, restaurants, you know, really being a gateway community to Smith Rock. You could see higher density residential development. So apartment complexes. There was a proposal a few years back looking into assisted living, you know, which is a relatively dense living pattern there. So lots of interest, lots of community conversations to be had there. No no vision of the outcome other than that this is really, I think, a more robust process than we went through in Tumalo. Tumalo was, you know, they were excited that sewer might be coming someplace in the future, and we're specifically concerned about a particular sewer in that case, and the county's involvement with it, as you all recall. In this case, you know, the sewer is coming, it's real, and I think we're going to see some real interest. You could imagine scenarios where zones were changed. So Terrebonne has a variety of subzones, and you could imagine those maybe being stepped down to say, look, we want to put our densest residential units here, and we're going to make sure the transportation infrastructure supports that, and then we're going to step down as you go away from that. Maybe these areas are good for new commercial or light industrial opportunities. Maybe these aren't. There's a limited number of large landholders who will have some pretty exciting moves that they could make, and a lot of people who are maybe looking to, you know, add an ADU or a second dwelling to their property. So really expect a robust community conversation.
Well, there's some small lotting patterns in there too that have never been developed on because they're just on rocky shelves, but just individual properties.
Exactly.
And it's just going to be a small house on it. It's not a big parcel.
Yeah, and Tumalo and Terrebonne are a little bit unusual in that they're comprised of very small lots. So when somebody has a half acre or a quarter acre, it's comprised of, you know, sometimes a dozen smaller lots that are each legally developable should they be served by sewer. So, you know, how do we mean to parse that out? In the current code, if you ask the question, how many units am I allowed to build on my acre here if I can serve them with sewer? Get me, you know, a dozen lawyers and all disagree with what that code means. It's deeply unclear. It wasn't built for this, and we need ideally we'll get to have all those conversations before somebody shows up with a check and a development plan.
And this is one of the original plats of the area. Tumalo and Terrebonne both are just not ancient, but I mean 100-year-old type plats, or more than that now. So that's why it's so interesting, and it's never been incorporated with the city council or a mayor, but the land use is out there and the history is out there too.
I just talked to Kristen today, who's from the sewer district, and you know, she owned the Terrebonne Depot originally. They moved it 30 feet, I believe, over. And then when they opened their restaurant, and now of course it's the Mexican restaurant, but she said you guys are having a joint meeting on October 9th. And I think that is so great. She's applying for 2 grants for 100,000 each, hopefully in order to help with the system. She said she's still at this point in time, they really do still need $1 million. I tried to get 2.5 million when it got kicked back from the federal kickback this last spring. Wasn't quite early enough in the wish cycle to get that funding, but they're just working at it bit by bit. So every 100,000 that they can get, but it's so wonderful to know that we're actually working on it with the road system. Like, let's do this together. And more people seem to be wanting to join the system. You know, even like Angus Acres, the capacity there was really getting really strained. And so, yeah, that whole community, I think, will be, you know, way ahead. And then, of course, the market that spent like $1 million or something on their sewer system. So, you know, it's going to really enable those 745,000 visitors to find a bathroom to use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting about Angus Acres because they do have their multi-unit system on a small parcel out there, but it's kind of at its limits.
Yeah, I guess the question I'd have is there any indication of how long or what population base, or even if they're considering it when Terrebonne decides to follow suit with Lapine and become a incorporated city, which, and I think we're kind of laying the groundwork from a planning standpoint. Eventually Terrebonne's going to be a city. Any guesstimate on when that push becomes reality?
Be interesting to see in our process to what extent that, you know, those rumbles are already happening. But, you know, I don't know, Peter, if you've run anybody, there's nobody who's presented that, you know, even so much as what would this look like? You know, certainly becoming a city is a big lift. The city of Lapine went through some growing pains with that, and you know, and you need a population base and a willingness to operate a city. But to date, no takers on that. But I think that you're correct that if the population doubles, there could be interest in that.
Because I guess that's what I look at is we're going to need to be planning for an eventual city with whatever it is we're allowing our planning side to be able to basically turn something over to somebody else to take it and run with it that we don't mess up what will eventually be a town.
It's a great point, and you can imagine, you know, what do we want to leave that future city? You could imagine a scenario where, you know, that there's a relatively high amount of regulation for sidewalks, stormwater, infrastructure, you know, so that the city is, you know, well built and robust, but that slows development, you know, as you require more of these facilities. So, you know, there's going to be a balance there between, you know, the city that you have 10 years from now and the path that you used to get there potentially.
I guess my concern would be developing them into a corner that
Right.
then creates a problem for redevelopment or redoing infrastructure, et cetera, you know, 10 years down the road or whatever, when things transition to somebody else's control.
Yeah, it's an interesting problem, and one I think that'll come in parts, you know. I think if we can get to the 2028 opening date and have a zoning code that produces you know, intelligible results and doesn't result in a lot of litigation because the confusion in the existing code, we've offset the immediate crisis. But, you know, just to your point, I think there's going to be an ongoing visioning process of, you know, how does this community grow? And again, just looking at Tumalo, very strong opinions about people who are like, this is my small town, I intend to die in this house. You know, nothing should change.
So
We'll get to hear them all.
would it make any sense to earlier somewhere in the process coming up, create a Terrebonne essentially planning committee or planning commission of their own for them to try to outline exactly where they want to go, that they can bring to us and help work with us, as opposed to us trying to mandate to them?
Yeah, so the way that we've done this, there's definitely kind of implementing, there's steps where you give the community more structure as you think about how to engage. So currently, as we're envisioning the engagement, and we haven't locked any of this in, as we come back to the board and say, here's our approach, what do you think? The default would be something kind of like the engagement that we did for the comprehensive plan, which is, you know, we show up in the gym, we let everybody talk, put stickers on poster boards, collect that information, come back to the community. We heard you say X. Here's what we were thinking. Are we getting this right? Recalibrate. You can remember the Tumalo process had a couple iterations of that. And then hopefully at that point, we show up in front of the Planning Commission and then ultimately the board with a legislative package that said, hey, we heard a community that broadly was looking at this with a little more of this or a little less of that as the parameters. Where do you want to land? A more structured approach, you can have these, you know, kind of TACs, you know, technical advisory committees, where you get people and you say, you are the official representative, and we're going to, in a kind of ongoing basis, use your expertise as a proxy for at least some of the community knowledge. There can be advantages and disadvantages to that. You know, it gives some people a strong voice, but it also gives you persistent access to people who are concerned with the community.
I just wanted to say something. I mean, okay, so this is the northern entrance into Deschutes County, Terrebonne is, and then, you know, La Pine is right on the southern entrance, but there's something happening still there, and I hadn't heard about this recently, but people are still jumping from that bridge. And I know there's signs that say, please don't jump, please call. They're very small signs because I personally went up and witnessed them, but I did hear that people are still jumping. I mean, we're the planning, you know, we're the commissioners with the Planning Commission. I know this is a serious behavioral health issue, but it's really, it is the gateway to Deschutes County. And I just felt like I had to bring this up because I heard like 1 week a wife jumped and a week later her husband jumped. And I just thought, you know, what a tragedy for their entire family. And I hadn't really shared it before, but I did hear it from people that do live in that community. So it's just like, what is it? We need to do something more.
Are you talking about the old bridge over the Crooked?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's actually right across the county line.
So it's on there. It's on Jefferson. Well, we've got,
Not even in Deschutes County.
well, but it feels like it.
Oh, I know, yeah.
It's-
Yeah.
Feels like that is the entrance to the county.
I just thought it was, when I heard that was, you know, that was what happened to a family, and I just thought that was so tragic. So anyway, I don't know, maybe behavioral health, something we can bring this up with them.
Serious matter. We
I mean,
should.
we need to do something more, honestly, because it hasn't stopped. Because, you know, I was hoping that I hadn't really heard about it. It was in the news a bit and then it disappeared.
Yeah, we can we'll take a note there and talk to our sister county there. I think that's also, that rest place, that rest point, I imagine that's an ODOT facility that they probably, we'll have to look into it, but I imagine that they own and operate that.
Okay.
And we just had Suicide Prevention Month, or I'm not sure if it's done yet. You know, the team the prevention team that came and talked to us. I mean, this would be something you could bring up with them and ask them about.
Well, so yeah, Terrebonne Community Plan. So there's a current, we think of it as a chapter of the comp plan. There's a current one that's out there. Was that the first one? So this is the kind of the first update to the first Terrebonne Community Plan, or is there a couple versions of it?
I can't recall, is the third one?
Yeah, there's some history. The Title 23, which was, I think put in was the evolution of the comprehensive plan that happened in like 2002 or 2003. Title 23 was, just one large document without any consideration of the reader. So when we did the comp plan update in like 2009, 2010, an outgrowth of that was to basically revisit the Tumalo and Terrebonne community plan.
Yeah.
So I would say this, essentially is, if you're starting, from the 2000s, this is kind of the third revisitation of it.
Yeah.
But we haven't, as I think noted in our materials, or certainly in previous conversations, we haven't engaged the Terrebonne community in well over a decade. And certainly, the remarks that Will made earlier this month about a catalytic event that really warrants engaging Terrebonne, we've just been talking about, is, the opportunity for sewering this community and what that represents in terms of, local control or self-determination, but not to mention just reinvestment and development opportunities at a scale that have been really limited because of the underlying soil conditions. So it's an exciting opportunity, and even in just the previous conversation, there's a lot of coordination that goes beyond just land use.
Yeah.
If I could just also chime in, as we plan the way that we engage the community in Terrebonne, we should be mindful of recent history. It was just a few years ago that there was a tremendous amount of turbulence in Terrebonne around what was happening with Highway 97. The whole couplet concept versus, widening Highway 97. In the end, basically we did nothing about the congestion on 97 through Terrebonne. There's going to be a really nice fix for Lower Bridge Way. But you look at ODOT records or OSP records. I mean, that is still an incredibly congested and dangerous place. And there, like I said, there was a lot of turbulence in the community. So as we sent, county planning staff to Terrebonne to engage in this community planning, we should be mindful about kind of, that recent turbulence and how to engage, kind of make sure that we don't engage people in the way that they just had a lot of conflict around, and can use different approaches, or just make it really clear to people that this is a separate thing, even though it could very well be, that whole question of like the couplet or not. I mean, that could all come back, in the midst of this community planning process.
It's interesting that you bring that up. I was just I was a current planner, so I wasn't on the long range team back then. And in the last iteration, over a decade ago, the Terrebonne Community Plan update, there I was in the Grange with, my stickers and my whiteboard, and this fire was already burning. This question of how do you solve transportation in there? And it was and continues to be very divisive in the community. And you can imagine that if Terrebonne doubles in population, my understanding is that ODOT did not design the couplet, or the kind of the transportation solution there for a Terrebonne that's twice as big. And what you can run into is a situation like we had at the north end of Lapine, you know, the first light as you come into town. There were a number of years there where development was ready to occur that would come off the highway at, you know, where that McDonald's, the light is at the first McDonald's there as you come into, but there was no light. And you run into a problem where it's, can you do your development down the road? No, because the intersection's blown out. Who pays for that? Well, you can. Was where we got stuck, and eventually, you know, the conversations happened so that an ODOT and a kind of a community effort came together to get that light in place. But you can imagine that if somebody wanted to put in, say, an assisted living facility with, you know, dozens or 100 units, and that has a certain amount of impact, and they're going to try to turn on a certain street, that may be the failure of that intersection. And we're back having this discussion about how you route people in and around Terrebonne. So it may be difficult to avoid that. And this was over a decade ago in Terrebonne was my first outing as in the long range.
Coming back.
I remember how spicy it was all the way back then.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so I guess I'm not suggesting we try to like hide from the transportation issues, but we proceed with sensitivity to recent history.
Certainly, all that we can.
Yeah, I would agree completely. I mean, we need to be sensitive to the community, and that's part of my thought is if we're going to try to plan and provide for a doubling or tripling of the size of Terrebonne, there's a lot of infrastructure issues that need to be addressed, you know, on essentially a city type level. And whether we have as the county planning commission has the expertise to be able to identify, say, essentially a city level details in a plan. That's kind of what I was getting at, is whether we need certainly some more expertise and maybe some local folks deciding what they want I mean, bottom line is eventually it's going to be a city someday, or it should be reasonably based on population and growth and such. It's going to act like one, whether it is legally or not.
Yeah.
It should be designed that way.
Yeah, and commissioners, I mean, I think we want to be very sensitive to, there's two phases to the Terrebonne Community Plan. One is we need to engage. It's going to start 2 weeks from now. We're going to have a panel to kind of just begin the conversation, and we see this as easily being a multi-year process that leads to the phase one being updated policies that are obviously introduced, informed by the community. We recognize in this day and age, communities don't speak with one voice. So it's going to be, I think, a very diverse and complicated message that we, starting with the Planning Commission, get to navigate. And then with the policy directions, whatever they are, whatever the board ultimately adopts, will provide that direction potentially, right, for phase two, which is how do we update the zoning code potentially, not just for new uses, but potentially new zones. The one thing that I would caution us at this stage is to assume that there's going to be a new city. I think there's Lapine was our last incorporated city, 20 years ago next year. And there is all of us have gone through the process of the city of Mountain View, which was, of course, a totally different scale. But the analysis, what that revealed, though, is the analysis that goes into the requirements that go into demonstrating that you can meet the statewide land use program, that you can commit to this urban level infrastructure within 20 years. It is an enormous investment, and it's very, very rare, I think, to see a built environment that was predicated on a rural land use pattern, even in an unincorporated community, where residents are ready to tax themselves at a somewhat significant rate to urbanize. It's not to say that it can't happen or it won't happen, but I just want us to be really, really sensitive to it, because there's a huge upfront cost and And one of the themes and why Lapine was ultimately so successful, they had 2 tries at it, by the way, second one was successful, is they engaged the community. There was community investment in exploring the possibilities of being a municipality in ways that the city of Mountain View, of course, did not have. So I just exercise like a cautionary note that we shouldn't presume that it's going to be a city. The Chair Cyrus is right. It functions already, like Tumalo, as a diverse, town because of its the mixture of uses there and the opportunities that it presents, and the fact that it's in an extraordinary location next to one of the 7th state wonders of Oregon, as well as just a unique microclimate in ways that are differ from, say, South County.
Don't forget all the pumpkin patches.
Yeah, right. The agro.
They're just opening up.
The agrotourism, there's where we have agrotourism is in the northern end of our county, the one that's really feels the most prominent. So I just offer that as context, because it's going to be a complicated, diverse engagement process in the ways that we saw with Tumalo, but the fact that there's a sanitary district that has some funding opportunities and possibilities, it's going to be a very dynamic experience for all of us.
Yeah, and I mean, and Peter, you just gave an example of essentially a large first bite of the apple towards incorporating. I mean, the decision to form a sanitary district, to tax yourselves in order to develop a municipal infrastructure that would change the pattern of development in your community. Folks in Terrebonne might say, yeah, that was enough. Like, we don't need to take any more bites of the apple. But I mean, in essence, that is a step in that direction. But I agree with you that I don't fully understand this, but I've been learning that even in the metro area, Washington and Clackamas counties, there's tons of urban residential development outside of incorporated cities, and I don't know how they get away with that, but that is the case. So I mean, it's very possible that Terrebonne never incorporates, but we need to think about it functioning in certain ways like a city.
One of the interesting things I think is the
I guess
economic.
commissioners just jump in. The planning commissioners are trying to raise their hand. So
No, the Wall Street Journal actually had a dot in Terrebonne for one of the country's billionaires. And because their economic income was showing up at like 66,000, and I kept saying, well, Phil Knight must be in it, but it's not Phil Knight. But the economic range in that community is really, it made him unable to get funding because it was so high. They didn't qualify for a lot of things. But yeah, a billionaire there's a dot in Terrebonne.
so yeah, Matt was going, but then we'll go.
So yeah, I guess that's kind of what, I mean, whether they actually go through the formal process to incorporate, they're going to function and act like a city or town. I mean, I look at what happened to Sisters. It was a fairly quiet town and stayed at a population of under 1,000 for a heck of a long time. And then they put in a sewer. And once they put in a sewer, Sisters exploded because it could. We've got high density, we've got hotels, we've got, lots more restaurants, we've got, lots of subdivisions going in. The growth has gone exponential because of the sewer. And I would expect the same to happen in Terrebonne. And all I'm thinking is we need to be thinking transportation primarily, so we don't end up with some of the same problems Sisters is experiencing with traffic. You got 97 coming through there. Quite frankly, they need to be looking almost at a bypass before they even start the process. But I think doubling in population is extremely conservative. Just once once the boundaries come off, or the limits come off, and with the sewer that it opens up, I just think there's going to be ideally, there should be a lot of planning going into what it's gonna look like when you turn it loose.
Jessica.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, what you're saying about thinking ahead. I also think that if you want to freak people out, like, you know, um, what Commissioner Chang's saying about being mindful of how we approach this very divisive community with a history of reacting to outside perceived outsides like ODOT coming in and say we're going to do this project, it's going to change everything. I think if I recall what I remember about that process with the couplet was things were pretty contentious, but then everybody from ODOT worked really hard. County staff worked really hard. Everybody worked really hard to talk with various stakeholders, get everybody talking, get a civil discussion going. And then I could be wrong about this, but my perception was that most people were pretty happy with what was then recommended to the board. There was some frustration then following that from community members, one of whom was on our commission, Commissioner Dale Crawford, was unhappy with the outcome of that process. So there's two parts to this. There's the community engagement process where people work really, really hard to come up with a solution that works for a lot of people, or maybe even most people. But then there's the implementation of that, which citizens really have, other than casting a vote, every so often, we don't really have any control over what happens to the plan once it gets submitted to the board. So I just think that going forward, it might be really good to consider also what the options are from the board level also, because the community can end up kind of frustrated if they're like, hey guys, this is what we want. We finally put together our dream package. And if you all feel strongly enough about it that you're like, well, we're not going to do that, then that upsets people. So, there's kind of just thinking in advance that there's kind of two parts to this that have to come together in order for you're always going to have some people unhappy, but in order for most people to be happy with the outcome of the whole process, then everyone's got to come together. So, and please, guys, correct me if I'm wrong on my memory of that whole trajectory of how that process went, but that was just what I remembered about it.
I guess I would say I think that there was peace eventually, but the original intent of the project was to address congestion and safety on Highway 97 through Terrebonne, and the project didn't do anything. I mean, again, that
wasn't it? It was a different
that
solution.
Bridgeway interchange
Yeah.
is going to be great for Lower Bridge Road, but the congestion problems, the safety issues, the accident occurrences, the crash occurrences in that chunk of Highway 97 through Maine Terrebonne, that is not improved at all.
So am I remembering this correctly, that ultimately the plan that was developed was different than the one that got implemented? Please just correct me if I'm wrong on that. I sometimes don't remember things exactly.
Mr. Kears, you're correct. I think that there was dynamic tension between, this is my characterization, but you had some very strong opinions in the business community about losing access. And then you had a myriad of experiences for those that live in Terrebonne that were diverse as it pertained to the couplet. And so the community wasn't speaking in one voice, or did not speak in one voice. And ultimately the Board of County Commissioners was required to make a decision. And so you couldn't center both audiences. And so, but that was the tension, and I think there'll likely be similar. I mean, tension is maybe that's too strong of a word, but I just think
I think it was tense.
Yeah,
and it's still tense.
Yeah, Terrebonne is. Everyone's correct. Like sewer is a significant investment that will change the community. How it changes, how to effectively address the opportunity for growth and investment and still retain the character of Terrebonne. There's opportunities for design guidelines and how to, maintain the small community feel. These are conversations that are forthcoming, but, I think it's important to acknowledge as I'm, hearing my inner Todd Cleveland, our on-site wastewater manager. I mean, one of the reasons why the sanitary district was ultimately established is because those existing businesses, including Oliver Lemons, very prosperous specialty grocery store, like they're operating on limited time on a septic system, and they don't have a lot of space. And so, the vibrancy of Terrebonne, these are my words, not Todd's, it's imperative that there was a solution to handling the wastewater volume, and they were running on borrowed time, and ultimately the community mobilized. The board had a role in this. There was a grassroots movement, but not addressing the business needs was going to have significant unintended consequences. And so, nonetheless, the businesses, I think, are still going to there's going to be a business perspective, those that are in the sewer sanitary district, those that are adjoining the sanitary district. I believe the road department has made investments as they're doing road improvements to put in sewer lines that because they only want there's road improvements happening to the extent that there's ever an annexation into that district. There's a line in place. So you just can't discount that set of factors. So that's going to be a very strong voice in the community. And then legitimately, all of you have experienced those that are grappling with change, what it represents, gentrification, housing affordability. I mean, we all know this is coming, and thankfully, I think we have a seasoned planning commission. We have a seasoned board of county commissioners, and it starts with a staff that has experience and expertise of engaging the community. So it's an extraordinary opportunity, but it's going to be tense and it's dynamic. And but what's the alternative? I mean, we need to engage. This is a catalytic event. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, which was what happened. I mean, the conversations around the couplet had various opinions from the business community and the various residents.
Yeah, my question was more like the plan that ultimately that was developed by ODOT. I just wanted to know if that was ultimately adopted by the board or if the board came up with a different solution than that's what I remembered. So what my comment is about is I think that frustrates community members when they contribute a substantial amount of their time to give public input and ultimately work together with ODOT and everyone else to develop a plan, and then something different happens. And I'm not trying to say, I mean, we elected you guys, so it's up to you, but that's a frustrating process as a citizen to offer so much of your, or maybe you're one of the business owners or you're one of the people who doesn't want anything to change, whoever you are, you're contributing all this time and making compromises with people and saying like, well, I don't really want this, but I guess I could have that. And negotiating for, I don't know how many months it went on. My comment to our board members is just, maybe as we start to engage the public in this, kind of maybe consider where your lines are, what you would be willing to do or not do, or how much flexibility do you have in terms of, if the community wants this, could you accommodate that, or are you kind of looking more like this is what makes sense to me in my role? So just something to think about more from the commissioner level when we engage these folks. And then if our staff have a good sense of that, I think we're still trying to get input from everybody and whatever they think, but I think it kind of helps us liaisons with the public to kind of say like, okay, well, what's realistic here? What are we really looking at? So
I think it's a urban unincorporated community, right? Rural unincorporated community, yeah. The plat's already there. There's probably not a lot of parcelization changes that are gonna happen, other than consolidating maybe too. You're not gonna subdivide, you're not gonna expand. So it's kind of a static starting point for the land divisions. And then after that, it's, yeah, vision and where we want to go with it. So it'll be interesting.
And, I mean, one thing that'll be a little bit different is, I mean, I think you kind of had a dynamic where there was divided community, there was ODOT, there was the county. And, you know, there were people who worked with ODOT on the couplet design. There were people who were very opposed to the couplet design who came to the county. And then, you know, so you had this sort of, you know, two design leader dynamic that could fall prey to community division. In this case, where all the community division is internal. I mean, they'll direct all of that towards the county staff who go down there to facilitate the community engagement. And then I suppose it could come out. I mean, that we, you know, the board of commissioners ultimately kind of sides with one faction or the other, if there end up being factions. But
maybe we could prevent factions then. Maybe that's the
yeah,
We were a split
yeah.
vote on that too,
No.
remember though? It wasn't like
Yeah.
clarity different than the community. We were split.
That's fair. That's
To
fair.
the
yeah.
extent that there's, I mean, to the extent that, again, we engage the community in a way that is kind of, you know, drives that face-to-face interaction to kind of come up with a shared community vision, as opposed to, you know, enabling division, or, you know, like, I'm gonna go talk to him, I'm gonna go talk to him.
That sounds perfect.
That's
Yeah.
our challenge.
Yeah, that's our challenge. Thank you. Now we know what our
How about the next
Really
topic?
important thing to be, really important thing to be mindful for. Thank you.
Wildfire and fire hardening.
Nice
So,
to see you.
yeah, there's a couple notes. If you saw the news, there was a $3.5 million grant for Southern Deschutes County. I think our forester and our Project Wildfire folks had applied. So that's going to be a nice big project in our area. So it's good to hear of money flowing these days. You know, we don't know what's happening sometimes with the federal money or the state. Also, just personally, I was interviewed on this topic today, ProPublica, some guy, Rob something, wanted to understand the difference between supporting R327 standards and not supporting the state map and requirements. So he was grilling me too. It was kind of funny, but see what he writes up on that topic.
Well, thank you. I'll tee this up. So this, of course, is in the wake of the statewide maps being withdrawn. And in that space, the state has left a space for local jurisdictions like Deschutes County to consider application of R327 to some or all properties. And it's a relatively constrained package. So R327 will apply to new dwellings, and it requires certain types of home hardening that will, particularly for homes that are exposed to ember storms, will make them less likely to be ignited by those. And so what will be coming before the Planning Commission and ultimately the board would be, and again, this is something that we've got to come back to the board and scope. So talking kind of a little bit ahead of where we're thinking about this is, a community outreach, see where the community is on this, coming back to the board and seeing what type of program you want to see explored. Initial discussions, R327 could be applied nowhere. It could be applied everywhere. It could be applied some places. In our initial discussion, the map was, it was always very controversial. And so, to the extent that, the Planning Commission and or the board recommends that some properties are R327 or some not, you find yourself very quickly back in this position of trying to make a map, and that can be difficult. At the same time, it's unclear that, R327 is appropriate necessarily for the entire community. I think that's the scope that this discussion happens in. You know, is this something that everybody should do? Some people should do, if some, which ones? And definitely expect, again, robust discussion associated with that.
So what is R327?
So it's
Aha.
it's a set
Back to
of.
the basics.
Go to the
Yeah.
basics.
Yeah. So it applies to new dwellings, and it's a set of home hardening requirements. It has to do with like attic venting, materials that are used for construction. So it represents, depending on who you talk to, it represents no to a significant increase in the initial construction cost of the home. I think it depends a little bit on the, you know, the type of the home that you were building anyways, and to what extent you were looking to incorporate, for example, you know, fireproof siding. You know, if you were already planning on doing that, then to get to R327 may not be a big jump. And so that's one of the questions that'll come up, is how much of an ask is this? And, you know, we talk about cost of construction, and, you know, where does this fall on the spectrum of cost? And without looking to ignite that conversation, there's some robust differences about, you know, is this a small ask or a big ask?
But
there's
there's
actually-
insurance issues in today's world. You know, the fact that the house I built in Malibu, that was a stucco house with a tile roof, survived without a fire truck at it, is because it was that kind of a house. Otherwise, you know, what is the cost for, I mean, I think everyone should build at the highest level they can. How much more does it cost? Do we know that now, Will? Like for, let's say, a 1,500 square foot house, is it gonna cost you another $3,000? But if you can't get insurance because you built this house that doesn't have all the bells and whistles that it should have in order to survive, you know, insurance gets really expensive.
Yeah, certainly the question of it as an investment, you know, let's say there, you know, there was no insurance, you know, and you're just thinking, how much more should I spend on my house? Given that over the horizon that I'm in, it might be showered with embers. You know, and there's that calculation that happens. And there's a second calculation, you know, at this point, as I understand it, there's no guarantee that insurance companies are going to respond to R327 as a branding. You know, they haven't all signed off that says, if you're R327, we're going to charge you 10% less. This is when I've talked.
Maybe they're gonna give you a price and they're not gonna say.
Give you
"Well,
an opportunity to buy insurance. Yeah.
That's-
But we don't know that either. I mean,
My neighbor.
logic says that the industry should respond by saying, we're going to consider you more favorably for coverage, and we're going to consider you more favorably for your premium. But you genuinely reducing your fire risk and getting credit for that from your insurance company are not the same thing.
But being insured is, you know, for some people is really critical.
Yes.
They have a lot of.
For
cash costs,
everybody.
purchase here. So they don't have a mortgage to worry about.
Well, and I guess that's the question is it something that's, right, as Commissioner Chang pointed out, I mean, there's not necessarily a connection between regulatory process and requirements versus what the insurance company, what the industry might give you credit for. You know, are we better to let the industry determine what they will insure? I mean, my insurance company, for example, has a point system for each individual house. And according to my agent, anything that is 60 points or above on a scale of 1 to 100, they can write immediately. If it's less than 60 points, they have to send pictures and do an assessment and ask for permission. And under a certain score, it's a no-go. And so, I mean, every different insurance company has its own process. They have their own formulas. They have their own mapping, regardless of what, you know, regulatory entities may dictate. I mean, we're having that same discussion internally with the fire department over, you know, how much staffing we should have and whether or not it makes an impact on insurability of houses in our district. I mean, some insurance companies may say that, you know, we want X number of people on staff at the fire department, where others say, well, we're going to go with your ISO rating, which is dictated by a whole different set of standards. I mean, I agree that, you know, we need to have houses that withstand fire and are resistant. So, you know, one house doesn't burn 6 other neighbors' houses because it caught fire. But by the same token, what's the answer? I don't have a clue.
R327 only applies to new construction, you know, so we're talking about maximally hundreds of units, you know, in a community of hundreds of thousands of people. So, it's an incremental step, and at the same time, even fully implemented, it doesn't move the needle a ton.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned before.
Well, it moves the needle a ton for that house.
That particular house, yes. Yeah, not getting your house burned down is good. And I've mentioned before both of these commissions before, that we saw a very similar parallel thing in the floodplain. In the 60s, massive flood losses, insurance companies unwilling to insure, and ultimately FEMA stepped in to very mixed ends. But that was in that way you have the government being both the insurer and the regulator, so that you can be assured that your hardening that you made, your elevation changes, your flood hardening would be reflected in your insurance in a really orderly way. I don't know that we have an appetite to, and or that it would turn out well if we tried to do that again. So we're here trying to kind of guess what a private market insurer is going to respond to, a point system. It may be that R327 is a persuasive package or part of a persuasive package.
And maybe that would make a panel worthwhile of some different insurance companies representing different portions of the industry to say, okay, guys, what is it you guys are interested in? Because we can guess, but unless the guys that are actually making a difference in the industry side, that might be something to consider.
I organized a panel with insurers and Senator Jeff Golden a year or two ago. And really what we know is that insurers shouldn't recognize defensible space and R327 home hardening in the way that they provide coverage and the way that they set your rates. The fact that they don't right now, and that the systems that they use for scoring can be very problematic. There are, so it would be good to have, and I could ask the same insurers, insurance agents to come in and talk. And, one of the things they'll tell you is that underwriters, they're oftentimes local insurance agents are battling with underwriters, because the underwriter in their remote desk says, oh, I looked at that property, I see trees. They see trees from above. And the insurance agent said, yeah, they limbed them all up. And that is a ponderosa pine. There's not a limb for 25 feet up that tree. So it's really difficult for a fire to come from the ground, get into the crown of the tree, and then fall on the roof. So it's different than if that house, if all those trees you see were 8-foot tall junipers with branches all the way down into the grass. The underwriter doesn't care. They just do their desktop exercise from where they are, and they come up with your score. So we have this disconnect between real local knowledge and like actual evaluation of properties and what the process that an insurance company uses to score a property right now. I think that we're not going to fix that without adopting the right guidelines and then basically shaking the insurance industry and saying like, look, this is the right stuff. We have to kind of pioneer it for them, and we have to do it in partnership too. They have to not be too far behind in terms of like, oh yeah, that sounds good. You're going to do that. We're very interested in that. We're going to, and there's, I'm hearing about a pilot that the state fire marshal is setting up in Sisters, where, Sisters as a city is already going ahead. They're adopting defensible space requirements. They're probably very soon going to adopt these R327 specialty codes, and they are going to try to get the insurers who operate in that area to provide, like on a pilot basis, to recognize those real risk reduction measures and reflect that in their coverage and premium decisions.
And there's another entity that I just found out about a month ago. It's called the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. is actually offering individual certifications for individual homes. That is kind of like your own personal Firewise designation, where Firewise is community-wide. There's actually some insurance companies are requiring the certification from this outfit. And so that might be something to look at and see kind of what their standards might be as an individual certification.
But I find it fascinating that my house was built 20 years ago and it actually was built correctly. I had no idea when we were buying it. I don't know. I don't think I was really worried about, fires and things. But yeah, it actually 20 years ago, somebody knew how to build a house correctly in Deschutes County. So I think that's really commendable.
Probably built by a fireman.
Well, you're saying it's probably,
I said,
it's probably R327
right.
and
Yes, it's one of, and so, I mean, thank goodness. But I just feel like I want to know the cost difference, and I do believe that every house needs to be as insurable as possible.
And I want to contribute that the one place where there's actual real data, on cost differences is Colorado. I mean, they have instituted these kinds of requirements. They've studied it. I think that, the what I've been told is, $2,000 difference possibly, which, on a $600,000 home, $2,000, if your house doesn't burn down in the next fire, it doesn't sound like a horrible burden. But in the debates that we had in this community 5-6 years ago at the state level, there is a whole lot of hand waving, and this is going to make a house cost $30,000 more. What I always ask people is proof it. It's like, show me your materials list, cost it out for me, and show me that actually makes a house cost that much more. If not, let's look at data from, in places where they have actually studied this.
Peter, didn't we do this a couple years ago with the cost difference? Or maybe, do you remember, Nick? I think we really do. I mean, it needs to be brought up for inflation.
Correct. Thank you for that acknowledgement. I remember when we had the WMAC, I think the analysis was that the added cost was nominal. My memory was 30-year loan, 30-year loan, factoring this in terms of construction costs, it was $20,000. So the message that I took away from it is that was something that could be easily amortized into a loan, a 30-year fixed, 30-year mortgage to have the house fire hardened in a way that would make it more resilient.
Was that written up, Peter? I mean,
I think cited in our report, or
that was done before I was a commissioner.
Correct. That was
I asked a lot of questions about this, and people told me that there wasn't real analysis and data.
No, I think you did. And I think maybe it was in 2019.
Oh, but
I think that was maybe like somebody like COPA kind of did a back of the envelope hand wave and gave you a number, but I do not think that is real data.
Just to say, we had a house built in 2018 and it's R327 compliant, just naturally. So, I mean, as I say, I don't know that there's an easy way to point a number to it. If you're going to do cement siding and have fire rated shingles, those are the big cost items. Next is a deck that is not a big overhang, which can capture the embers rolling around underneath it. And after that, everything's minimal. I mean, because shingles are going to be
windows are already required. Fine mesh screening on your vents is not going to cost you anything.
Yeah. So as I say, the number almost doesn't matter at that point. So we're going to be here all night if we take a long time on each item. So I don't know where we. How long does the planning commission usually go into the evening?
An hour.
And
Depends.
We're just rolling here. We're going to
before
go.
we leave this one, can I just ask? I thought we were looking at defensible space requirements too.
Not as part of this package. So we're waiting for the state fire marshal. So what came out of and Kyle, I wish Kyle Collins was in this. Either jump in if I've got this incorrect, but what came out of the retraction of the fire maps, which also included defensible space standards, is that the state fire
meeting?
marshal is going to work on propagating basically a model code and some other stuff regarding defensible space. It's supposed to be out by the end of the year. We're waiting for them to kind of give us the sideboards and see what's happening at a state level before we look at local implementation. We didn't want to get ahead of whatever that program would be. But that's obviously a huge second and maybe even a bigger part of.
Well, and it's the structure of, is there going to be a map? Is it going to be a one size fits all map where say, you know, we're a high wildfire county across the whole county or not? Because then it's applying whatever could be applied to it. So just doing the exercise will get you part of the way there. The second bullet point, draft amendments for comprehensive plan and Deschutes County Code for public hearings. What?
Yeah, so once we get through the public engagement and with.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Back to you with a legislative package if you.
Yep, for the whole thing. Yeah, good. Okay. We can handle, well, that got a lot of conversation going real quick on that one.
It's gonna be a big one.
Clear and objective standards for multifamily development.
Yeah.
The next module.
Yeah, so we've been doing these modules of clear and objective standards. Of course, you know, the deadline is passed before we had kind of a safe harbor to not be subject to claims of not being clear and objective. And so we knocked out some of our biggest concerns. And we had one remaining module that related to multifamily development, site plan review, conditional use permits, and the airport safety combining zone. To date, no one's come to us and said those aren't clear and objective and we don't have to follow those rules. Where I think that will come up is in Terrebonne when they start trying to build multifamily housing in 2028. So it's important that we get there by 2028. Cal's leading that one. He's out on family leave right now, but he'll be bringing that back before you. Very similar to previous packages of just trying to explain what we're doing in a way that's clear and turns out the same way every time. And
Good.
Any thoughts on that one? That's an easy one. And for the last one here, I've got the less.
We're speeding.
I
up
just told him we were
pretty
speeding up.
I heard accelerate.
No, just, yeah.
For the yes, so great. So for the last one here, I've got the illustrious Nicole Mardell, who's working on this land divisions near the Bend urban growth boundary.
Well. Yes, good evening, commissioners.
Waiting patiently in the back there for it.
Of course, happy to be here. I did give the Planning Commission a little bit of a overview of this at your last meeting, but just for the good of the group, this was a project that was added to our work plan following the comprehensive plan update process. There's concern that rezoning of land adjacent to the city of Bend's UGB could potentially prohibit future urbanization as the urban growth boundary continues to expand in the future. So there was some desire for, you know, what could the county do to allow for rural residential development on these properties while doing it in a way that is friendly to future urban scale development once it's eventually brought into city limits many years down the line. So the city of Bend is kicking off their multi-year growth plan update. They may or may not adopt what are called urban reserves. That's the formal designation from the state of being essentially urban holding land. That is essentially kept at low density and first priority for future UGB amendments. So this is not that. We're calling it Urban Reserve Light. We're trying to find a catchy name, and that's the one that continues to stick the most, I guess. But this is essentially, you know, right, it's very exploratory. There's really no jurisdiction in Oregon that's done this. So exploratory in that we're taking a look at potentially incentives, regulations, kind of changes to our zoning code that could allow for division of residentially zoned property, but perhaps there's a requirement to cluster that development. So that eventually when land is brought into the UGB and you're trying to put in, you know, an urban level of density in a neighborhood, it's more streamlined because there aren't pre-existing utility connections or homes that are in the way that could impact that. So we are working very closely with the city of Bend on this. They're currently reviewing our scope of work and the project timeline. Once we have that kind of completed, we'll share that with both the board and the Planning Commission. But we received a grant for this from the Department of Land Conservation and Development, a $25,000 grant. So really our timeline is to complete this by June 29th of 2027. But our goal is to have essentially a 7-month exploratory process to develop the code, which will take place starting in September. So we're ramping up right now, where we can really dig into some of the details with technical experts like developers, utility providers, property owners, et cetera, and really kind of fine tune some of this really technical code and look at other examples. And then after that 7 months, we'll have a check-in with the Planning Commission and the board to see how we want to proceed. And our requirement from DLCD is essentially just to have adoption-ready documents. So again, because this is such a unique exploratory process, as we're often the pioneer on these projects, we have some flexibility in how we choose to act, but I think it should be pretty interesting for the Planning Commission and the board to explore. So that's my overview. Let me know if you have any questions.
Got a quick question for you, Nicole. So this would be on lands that are zoned already permissive of housing, we're not talking about code amendments that would permit housing where it's not already, but we're talking about the arrangement of that housing. So in that sense, perhaps more, as you say, more planning ahead for when it eventually urbanizes at urban level densities. Is that right?
That is correct. So we're looking specifically at residentially zoned property. And we're kind of actually focusing in more on property that was recently rezoned from EFU in most cases to MUA 10. But there are a couple parcels like north of the city of Bend that have, you know, a different residential designation. So we didn't want to limit it only to MUA 10, but it's specific to already residentially zoned.
Thank you. Yeah.
Nicole, how far out from the city does the analysis area go?
A great question. That's one of the questions that we're posing to the city of Bend in our scope of work. At first blush, we were thinking about maybe 1 mile from the city of Bend's UGB, but it might go as far as to 2 miles. We're still looking for feedback on that.
Because I mean, we've done rezones. I'm thinking about the one near Rob Rastovich I don't know whether it's a mile out or not, but it's not like right next to the city. It's a decent ways out. Basically at the end of the Arnold irrigation canal.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the first steps of this process is to take a look through using GIS at recent development applications that we've seen, recent rezoning requests, take a look at what type of activity that we're seeing within a certain UGB of the city of Bend. So I think that we'll have some more information of just, you know, what are we seeing in terms of recent development proposals or rezone requests, and then that might help us determine how far out to go.
So why not just do a full urban reserve designation?
Yeah, that's a great question. That process is typically led by the city. So it's our understanding that the city of Bend, when they've been presenting their growth plan scope of work, they offered it to their city council. They said that, you know, they're going to move forward with updating the growth plan, their comprehensive plan, so updating their policies. And then there's actually going to be discussion about this on Monday during the board's joint meeting with the city of Bend. They're going to do essentially a sequential review process to update quite a few of the necessary studies that will lead to their urban growth boundary amendment proposal. And then after that, I think it's around year 2028, they have an optional task of doing urban reserves. So they are interested in it, but they haven't actually committed to doing it. But either way, it's at minimum 3 years out. So I think that there was interest from community members and the board, which is, you know, when we submitted this application, we requested consent from the board, interest in exploring what could be done just in this interim period. And again, it's pretty, you know, loose because there hasn't really been an example of this. So urban reserves can be very restrictive. So they can essentially not require any upzoning of property. You have to stay essentially at a very specific density. Your land is essentially to be held. I think this is trying to allow for limited development opportunities while doing it in a way where it's just configured in a way that leads to ease and future urbanization. So trying to find kind of a balance rather than just restricting development on that property.
Thanks. I guess as a follow-up, if it's okay. How do you plan for back to the infrastructure and the streets and the highways and the traffic loads and sewers and all kind of that stuff?
It's a really good question. For this project, we have a technical, what we're calling a technical advisory committee that's very informal. I've already met with, Pacific Power, Cascade Natural Gas, ODOT, the road department, City of Bend. We're planning to meet with some developers who have developed recently in these UGB areas. AKS Engineering, I think, is a recent example of one. But we're trying to interview some of these folks who have essentially been a part of developing previously rural land and to ask about some of the challenges that they've run into, especially as the City of Bend is starting to grow into their urban growth boundary areas from their, 2016 UGB expansion process. So we're trying to kind of gather some lessons learned. But as part of it, that's why there's such a key partnership with the City of Bend. I think we'll be relying on them because they do have infrastructure plans in place. They have their transportation system plan that they'll be updating. So I think we'll be looking to them for quite a bit of feedback on how they're planning for it as well.
Yeah, and certainly not trying to get it ahead of the process or what could be a requirement, but you could require a shadow plat, so it, as part of it, requirement to rural residential development. I'm getting way ahead, but your question's a good one. But that's a tool that, if you were, we're trying to allow, as Nicole said quite well, we're trying to acknowledge that there could be demands, market demands for some rural development on these properties that are proximate to, in this case, the City of Bend. How do you do that in a way while still recognizing these lands are considered high priority for urbanization? And so trying to find the best of both worlds. And that's one of likely many concepts that could potentially come out of this in coordination with the city that would ensure that under this concept of shadow plat does fit within the master plans of the City of Bend's water and sewer systems.
Yeah, and I guess partly my thought was like, say, high road traffic infrastructures, that kind of stuff. I mean, quite frankly, I have serious concerns about what the city is doing internally with their road diets and some of the areas where they're taking out traffic lanes and eliminating the ability for emergency vehicles to get from one side of town to the other. I mean, when you shrink streets from 4 lanes to 2 lanes and you don't provide any place for cars to pull over, when an ambulance or a fire engine turns on its lights, they create a parking lot. And so, I mean, they're in my opinion, as somebody who does drive some of those pieces of equipment, they're putting life safety. They're creating some problems on that side when they eliminate the ability for emergency vehicles to get across town.
It's definitely something to think about. I mean, if I could just speak to this for a minute, the problem that this is meant to solve is that what we've seen in the City of Bend, and especially in the southeast corner, is when they brought in RR10 zoned lands that were already built out at RR10 densities, it's incredibly difficult to work around those existing homes, work with those existing property owners. They've got utility stuff going all over the place on their property. And then to be able to come in and say, now we're going to have, in your 10 acres, we're going to have 80 homes instead. It's extremely difficult to redevelop that. So the concept here is to not restrict those RR10 property owners from exercising their property rights, developing, some homes if they want, but to do it in a configuration that allows for, it actually, is more thoughtful about kind of how future infrastructure is going to have a place than not.
I agree completely. That's my concern as far as building in the ability to redevelop into higher density. We're on the same page. I agree completely.
Yeah. And then why isn't the City of Bend just going ahead with their UAR is, as you heard, basically they're required to do the UGB first. And we have no idea how long the UGB is going to take and whether they're going to have any gas left to do a whole nother process after that's done. So, this is in my opinion, like a good strategy, interim strategy to just try to ensure that we have the easiest path possible for future urbanization for lands that are right up next to the UGB.
One other question for you, Nicole, too, on that, if you'll entertain it. Parcel size, eligibility, thoughts about it. Probably too early to, but won't that figure in?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think our general goal would be to maintain the current minimum lot size that's allowed in the zone, but I think as part of this, we'll be analyzing what are the parcels that we're working with that are within 1 to 2 miles of the city of Bend's UGB, of the residentially zoned properties, what are their size, what is the average size? I think in our grant application, we did discuss whether or not it would make sense if property is being rezoned from EFU to a residential zone, should there be some discussion in our zoning code of, you know, if you rezone after a certain date, should there be a different minimum lot size? I think that falls a bit more into more of that high desert zone project discussion. So I think we'll currently, when we're working with the city of Bend, they didn't feel that that was necessarily a priority, is to work with the minimum lot size. It's more again about the configuration of where development is occurring, kind of the design.
Okay, well, so yeah, Ben's still growing. I guess that's the conclusion there. So these are a list of projects that are kind of on the horizon. I know that there's a exercise in doing you know, priority projects, kind of a project list, proposed project list each year, and kind of come back and figure out if there's resources to be able to pick up another project mid-season. So yeah, we got a growing community and we're figuring it out as we go.
So one real quick.
Yes.
Urban growth boundary. I know Sisters is working on that right now. Is that something that's gonna come before us then, before they're finished? How's that process work?
That application will come before you, which is part of why we actually didn't include them in the housing panel, because we wanted you to be fresh for that. So the city council just met yesterday to decide whether or not to move forward with initiating a PAPA, their formal land use application. They decided to hold off. I believe they're going to meet again on October 22nd. That'll give time for following the Mackenzie Meadows Village rezone, which is, I'm assuming, looks like I'm seeing a lot of nods. Looks like everyone's familiar. That gives enough time to see if that rezoning application is appealed and whether or not they want to contemplate that as part of their application package. So holding off, but that'll come to you, I assume, within, the next 3 to 4 months.
They're making a decision on the 5th of November, according to my
5th of November. Okay.
according to my conversations.
Is that really like long enough to know whether it's going to be appealed or not? The decision will be appealed or not?
Emergency adoption, it's just subject to the 21-day appeal period, and I believe the board's considering it next Wednesday, October 1st. So the 21 days would end
on the 21st,
right? 22nd, yeah, 22nd.
Okay, thank you.
There you go. Anything else then tonight? Want to thank everybody. Thank you for your commitment for doing this each time the planning commission's called in, and thanks for your leadership here. Sorry I ran such a long meeting.
No, and actually I would like to for your guys' benefit, I would like to thank the quality and the level of the professionalship of the staff that we've been working with, and it's been a fun, enjoyable process. And like I say, they've been organized enough to where our meetings have generally been kept relatively short, and we could, I certainly appreciate, all the folks that we have to work with.
Great. Please, Jessica.
Along the lines of appreciating people, I really want to appreciate the three of you also, because it's pretty amazing to be able to have access to your elected officials. And I think that knowing you guys and knowing that you like to engage with the citizens and the public in general, I just think that it goes a long way to settling things down and helping people understand that you are human beings like everyone else, and you're doing, you're thinking about really complex issues and nuanced issues. And I just think that, I just want to appreciate you guys and thank you for doing what you do, but also being willing to talk to people on a regular basis.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, yeah. Good evening this evening.
The meeting's over.
Yeah, so when it's over, anything else? Anything else? So yeah, we can call this meeting adjourned. Have a great night. Thanks, Tony, for being online.
Is it my favorite?
Thank you.